So we're at the Mishnah on Mem Aleph Amud Aleph, the top of Mem Aleph Amud Aleph. Kol chazaka she'eni matayna ene chazaka. Morning, Rafal. We're just starting the Mishnah on Mem Aleph Amud Aleph. 2 lines to the top. Kol chazaka she'eni matayna ene chazaka. Like we said from the beginning of this parak, Chesed Gimel Shanim doesn't work like what we would call under the secular law adverse possession. That just because someone's staying on something, it doesn't make it his. It's only because he has a taina. There's a reason, there's an explanation that the person who's a machzek can claim, he has a claim that justifies why it's his. He bought it from someone or he yarshened it. But a chazaka, just having chesed mulshanim without any explanation, ain't a chazaka. Ketzah. I'll give you an example. If Reuven says to Shimon, "What are you doing in my land?" And Shimon says back to him, "No one ever told me anything. I saw it was uninhabited. I thought I was going to be a homesteader in my covered wagon and get my 40 acres." Ain't a chazaka. It's not a chazaka because Shimon has not expressed a taina. He hasn't said a reason why it belongs to him, and he doesn't get to take it. We're talking about obviously a case Reuven can prove that it was originally his. Reuven doesn't lose it because someone else was living on it. So Amalei Adam Davne Olam Ein Chazak Shemachartali. But on the other hand, Shem would say, "You Reuven sold it to me. Shemasatli Matana. You gave it as a gift. Avicha Machrali, or your father sold it to me. Avicha Nasnali Matana. Your father gave it as a gift. Harezu Chazak. That is a Chazak. Bava Mishum Yerusha Ein Tzarich Tainim. But on the other hand, although this is true, that is a general rule, you can't give a chesed gimel shanim without explaining how it came to you. If someone got it as a Yerusha, that means Shimon is on the land, and we know it originally belonged to Reuven, but Shimon got it from his father Yaakov, and he doesn't know how Yaakov got it. So even though he doesn't have a taina that he knows exactly how his father got it, but we can impute a taina to the Yerush. The Yerush is not responsible to know how his father got it. So even though he's not saying, "I know how my father got it," he can say, as long as his father had it, as the Rashbam says, for at least one day, that's sufficient that we can impute a taina, we can ascribe a taina to Reuven, to Shimon, even though he doesn't know exactly how his father got it. The Gemara says, "What do you have to tell me that a chazak sheni matayin is not a chazak?" Meaning, although, like I said, we have such a thing as adverse possession, that's only the Gemara says there's no such thing. We never heard of such a thing that you should own something just because someone let you use it. Ma'al detema. So after the Gemara, the reason is because like this: Ma'al detema hay gavra mizvin zavnale hayara. Really, Reuven did sell it to Shimon. Ushtara havale, and Shimon had a star of that it was sold to him. Ve'erkis, and it was lost. V'haida kama hachi. So that which Shimon says, "I don't know how it came to me." Savar, he says he's not saying that he bought it from Reuven. He's just saying, "I was on it for 3 years, and just Reuven never told me anything." Savar, it's because he thought, "Yamina mizvin zavnali." If I say that it was sold to me, Hayara, this land, I'll be asked, "Where's the star?" Helkach lemle anan dilma star helkach lemle anan dilma star havale going pasach pichalilam. I might think that maybe even though the person doesn't have a taina, and all he said was, "I'm here for 3 years," I just because the original Reuven was never around. And like we say, pesach pi will speak on behalf of the mute, meaning that the person who's a muchzik, maybe he thinks that it's a better taina for him to just say that I was here for 3 years without saying that I bought it, because since he lost his star, he thinks that's going to to make his taina worse, because he's going to ask if he says he bought it. When you buy, you're supposed to get a star, and he doesn't have a star. So he figures he'll just say that the person never used it and I took it over. Even though that's obviously that's a bad taina, he doesn't realize, this person doesn't realize that's the worst taina. So maybe we make a taina, we make a claim on his behalf that it was really bought. And as we know, the svara is that after 3 years, the person is allowed to lose his star. So his chazaka really would work. Kamash Malon. So that's what's coming to tell you. No, we don't. Like we said, a person can't make a taina and then change his taina. But if a person can, we can construe his taina to be a better taina. So maybe we would construe it on his behalf and say what he really means to say is that he bought it. Kamash Malon, that we don't do it unless the person himself says, I only said that I didn't buy it, that I just found it like this, is because I was scared that I was going to be asked for shtar, which was which was a problem that was not really a problem. If the person would say that himself, then he would believe. But we don't make that taina on his behalf. Zot Rav Anan shakel bidka ba'ari. Rav Anan had a flood that went through his land, and it got rid of all the border fences. Azal hada guda ba'arei lechaver. So Rav Anan went back and he rebuilt the fences, and it's very hard to tell exactly where the fences were. It was the middle of Nebraska. There was no rivers. There were no landmarks left. And by mistake, he pushed his fence into his neighbor's property. Also, the Kameder of Nachman, they went to ask Rav Nachman, what's the din? Does he have to move back the fence? Amalei zil hada. So the neighbor complained to Rav Nachman that Rav Anan had taken away part of his land by putting the fence on his land. So Rav Nachman told Rav Anan, you have to push the fence back right to the border. And it seems to be obvious. In fact, tomorrow, but Rav Anan didn't go down so easily. He said, "V'achzikili," but I have a chazaka. Means I put it here, and he wanted to say I should have a chazaka immediately. As the Gemara is going to explain, it's talking about specific circumstances where he wants to make a chazaka on the spot. Amalei. So he said to him, "Come on, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yishmael, are you saying like Rabbi Yehuda and like Rabbi Yishmael?" As we saw earlier, Rabbi Yehuda was chaylik on the Manda Amar. The Tanakama said you make a cheskes gimel shanim in order that the cheskes gimel shanim is an explanation for why the muhsik did not hold on to his shtar. Rabbi Yehuda disagreed with that. Rabbi Yehuda said that you can make a chazaka right away. The reason for the cheskes gimel shanim is that the news, so the person could stay on the land for a year, and then at that point it will become known to the person who's far away. They'll take a year to get them, and they'll take a year for the person in Spain to come back. But he doesn't hold. He holds really that the chazaka could be immediately. So, and Rabbi Shmuel, we're going to see later on, holds similarly that the Amri kol b'fanav la'al ta'al chazaka. As soon as the person becomes aware that someone is on his land, it's an immediate chazaka. And so is that the reason why Rav Anan was trying to say that he should have a chazaka right away because he put up a fence on this fellow's property? Less hilchos kavasai, but we don't pass him like that. We pass that you do need a cheskes gimel shanim. Amalei, so Rav Anan finally explained what was his reason for claiming that having placed the fence on his neighbor's property after the flood, that he should be zeicha to part of his friend's property. But he said, my friend and my neighbor was meichel to me this land. The asa v'sai b'guda b'hadai. He helped me build this fence. So the fact that he helped me build this fence, it's not, I do have a taina. And my taina is that he gave it to me. And therefore it should be a chazaka when he's giving me something, and my proof that I have a raya, let's say, I have Adam that he was building it to me. We'll see why he doesn't need 3 years for it. but since he did it together with me, I should be able to keep this land. Amalei. So the Gemara asked the obvious question. Mechila b'toisi. What kind of mechila? You're saying your neighbor, Rav Nachman said to Rav Anan, you're saying your neighbor helped you build a fence. Your neighbor thought he was building the fence where the border used to be. But it turns out later that he was building it in his own property. He never meant to be meichel to you. Ad gucha if you have a yadis levada ki levadata. You yourself, Rav Anan, you did this also by mistake. No one's chayshed that Rav Anan was trying to steal. He just placed the fence in the wrong place because there were no landmarks and he misplaced it. So you yourself, the same way you didn't know, he also didn't know. So that's the reason. So it's Nishkein Taina. That's why Rav Nachman said that Rav Anan did not get to keep this land that he had mistakenly incorporated into his own land from his neighbor. Rav Kahana Shakal Bidka Ba'are. Rav Anan had the same thing. He had a flood that swept away all the fences that showed the borders between him and his neighbor. Azal Hasel Guda Ba'ara and he also put the fence onto his neighbor's property. Also, the Kamei Rav Yehuda, they came to Rav Yehuda to ask what to do. Azal Isi Trey Sadi. And he came, the neighbor who had Rav Kahana impinging on his land, he brought two Eidim. Chad Amar Tarti al, Chad Amar Tlas al. One aid said that Rav Kahana had infringed on this neighbor's property 2 rows of from his field, and the other one said he infringed 3 rows. Amalei. So Rav Kahana said I'm sorry, not Rav Kahana. Rav Yehuda said to Rav Kahana, Zil Shlim Tarti. You have to move the fence back by 2 rows. Migoy Tlas, out of the 3. Why? Because you definitely, both of the Eidim agree that Rav Kahana infringed at least 2. You only have 1 Eid saying that he infringed 3. So that 1 Eid, that 1 row, we only listen to the part from that Eid that he said 2 rows. We disregard the 3rd row. Because we have 2 Eidim on 2 rows, we only have 1 Eid on the 3rd row. Amalei, so he said back, Rav Kahana said, why are you paskin that we listen to these 2 Eidim? Come on, Rav Shimon Elazar. You're saying like Rav Shimon Elazar. Tanya, Rav Shimon Elazar. Loi nechleku beisham yisrael al shtei kitei Eidim. So this is a machlokes between Beisham and Beisil that they argue al shnei kitei Eidim sha achas imeres mana v'achas imeres masayim sheyesh b'chlal masayim mana. Rav Shimon Elazar says that there's a machlokes between Beisham and Beisil that if Ruvain Shimon claims that Ruvain borrowed money from him, and he brought 2 sets of Eidim, and 1 set of Eidim said that Ruvain owed $100, and the second pair of Eidim said he owes $200. So in that case, Rav Shimon Elazar says, "Sheyesh b'chlal masayim mana." Over there, you certainly have 1 pair of Eidim that says he owes at least 100. So we listen to everyone is going to agree in that case that Reuben's going to have to pay 100. There's no machlokes between Beisham and Beisil according to Rav Shimon Elazar. Alman nechleku, what do Beisham and Beisil disagree on? Al kad achas. It was only 1 pair of Eidim, and one of the Eidim she'echad ayim mana, ve'echad ayim masayim. One of the Eidim says it was 100. The other one says 200. Beishamai says we don't listen to these Eidim because they're contradicting. They're both talking about the same loan, and one says it was 100, and one says it was 200. So Beishamai says we disregard the Eidim since they're contradictory. You can't put together the 2 Eidim. Beisil says no. We can listen. We can be mechalik the Eidim. We could say even though 1 Eid said 200 and one said 100, the one who said 200 was also saying that it was a loan of 100. So it now comes out that over here also, Rev Yehuda, who paskin that when one pair of Aedis, one aid said 2 rows was taken by Rav Kana, the other one said 3 rows. We listen to the aid. We make one Aedis from the two of them, and we say it's a minimum of 2. In fact, the Gemara, Amalei, Vaha, my sinalach igirta me marava, the enalach Rav Shimon Elazar. Rav Kana said, why are you paskening like Rav Shimon Elazar, who says this is a machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel? But we don't pasken like Beis Rav Shimon ben Elazar. We pasken fakert that the machlokes of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel is even when it's 2 separate pairs of Adam, and therefore we don't have to. We should disagree. Even we should disagree in this case. We should also disagree over here that we should say that the 2 Adam contradict each other, and therefore that the machlekes is only when there's 2 pairs of Adam. But where there's 1 pair of Adam, where one says 200 and one says 100, both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree that since the Adam contradict each other, we don't listen to them. Amalei l'chitesi. So Kana said, I don't care that you're telling me you have a letter from Eretz Yisrael that the lacha is not like Rav Shimon Elazar. When you show me the letter, then I'll believe you. But in the meantime, I'm going to pass like Rav Shimon ben Elazar. Hahu Gavra, the Dor Bekashta, Baliyasa, Arbashni. There was a person who was living in Kashta, and he was living in the upper stories in the upper story of a house. As we've seen before, they used to have houses that the ownership was divided between the bottom floor and the top floor. This person lived on the top floor, and he was living there for 4 years. Asam Ari de Besa, Ashkechei. And the person who owned the house came and he found him living there. Amalei, my boys, by Besa, why are you living in my house? Amalei, mi planyas have been to the Zavin. I bought it from Yana, from Pliny, and Pliny bought it from you. So at this point, we're assuming that he's saying, I bought it from Yana, and I'm assuming that Yana bought it from you. As far as I know, he bought it from you. Also, they came to Ruchia, Amalei, what's the din? Does his 4 years of chazaka, is it treated as chazaka? Is he considered to have a taina? Because he says, I bought it from Pliny, and Pliny bought it from you. Amalei, Islach Sadi, the Darbe Iu, the Zavinach Afilu Chad Yuma. If you have a raya, he said to this person who was living for 4 years in the upper story, if you have a raya that the person you bought it from lived there for even 1 year, then we'll treat it as if you have a taina. But if not, not. Zok Gemara, Amarav, Haviyasivne Kamei de Chabibi. Rav says, I was sitting in front of Rav Chia, my uncle. Why do we say that it has to have been that the person who was living there was there for at least 1 day? What's the svara? If we're saying that if the person who the current occupant is claiming he bought it from was there for he knows that he was there for 1 day. He could bring a ride that it was there for 1 day. And then he has a taina that he's a lekeach, just like we said in the Mishnah, that if someone who's yarshin, we make a taina on his behalf. A lekeach also, someone who purchases, we can make a taina on his behalf. So as long as we have a reason, as long as we have edus to know that he's a lekeach, that means we know that the person who bought it from him was there for at least 1 day. So he has we taina on his behalf that the person who he bought it from had bought it from this original owner. So the Gemara said it has to be that's why he has to have been there at least 1 day, so that his taina is as a he can't be expected to know whether the person before him, how he got it into his hands. But as long as we know that he for sure had it, from his perspective, from the perspective of the current muhsik, the one who had it before him, the person who he bought it from, was an owner. So, in fact, the Gemara. So, Rav Chia said back to Rav said that Rav Chia said, why does it have to be that the owner was there for a day? Sometimes people buy something and sell it immediately by night, and he never even had one day to stay in it. So why do you have to? Why does it have to be in order for us to taina on behalf of the current occupant that the person before him had it for one day? Maybe he bought it and he knew it was a flip, and the person before him never stayed there. And why can't we taina for him even if the person before him didn't have it for a day? Dr. Gemara, Rav Chia was not mask. And Rav said, I saw what Rav Chia held about this. He did not agree. He said it does have to be one day. If the current occupant says that the person who I'm saying I bought it from, in front of me, he said, he's saying that I saw that he bought it from you. He's saying a taina. It's only where he says where he says a taina that I saw that you bought it from me. Mehemen. In that case, he's believed. Then he could say a migu that he could have said, he didn't have to say anything about buying it from Yena. He could have just said, I bought it directly from you, the first owner. Since he's a muchsa gimel shanim, as long as he has a taina, if he says, I bought it from the original owner, without this intermediary, this flipper, he would have been believed. So he said that you have to have a raya that the person, not that you have to have some claim that that the person before it owned it. He can make a claim that I saw that person bought it from the original owner. Amarava, Kavasa de Rav Chia Mistab. He said that this L'chai Rav Chia is right. It can't be that he just claimed I bought it from someone and have no idea, even though it wasn't there at any amount of time. It has to be that he either there's a raya that he was there for one day, or that he says a taina that it originally belonged to him. That he knows that it was bought from the first owner. The Tani, Haba Mishum Yerusha, ain't it tzarech taina? We said in our Mishnah, that was the end of our Mishnah on Amar Aleph. Someone who comes out to Yerusha, he doesn't have to explain how he doesn't have to come with a bari claim, with a certain claim that his father had purchased it from the person that we know is the original owner. Because a Yerush is not expected to know his father's affairs, and it could be his father bought it. So Tainu delay boy, Harai boy, but he does. So we make a inference, we make a deal. The Mishnah said he doesn't have to have a taina, but he does have to be able to prove, like the Rashbam had said on the Mishnah, that his father had been there for at least one day. Or he could say, like we said, that that he knew that his father got it, which would be a taina. In fact, the Gemara of a Dilma, Lorai boy, Veloy taina boy. Gemara says that's not a raya from the Mishnah. Because that diak is not a good raya. Even though it says Habam Mishum Yusha ain't it tzarech taina, it doesn't mean medafka he doesn't need a taina, but he does need a raya. Maybe it means that he doesn't need a raya and he doesn't need a taina. He doesn't need either one. Therefore you raya from our Mishnah that that you need a raya is not correct. Even though the Iba is sema, or else I could say shani lekech. Maybe your inference is right, and the Mishnah says that a Yerush does need a raya, but he doesn't need a taina. But maybe over here, when we're talking about a lekech, it's not exactly the same din as a Yerush. Maybe a shani lekech is different. The leshadi zuzi b'chdi, because a person does not a person who buys something is not giving money for nothing, right? He's buying this property from someone, and we're saying he has to prove that he had it for one day. He could always have made a migu and said that I just bought it directly. So we can ascribe to him that chances are that he really knew that the person who he bought it from had purchased it. and we don't have to prove that he doesn't have to prove that it was there for 1 day. Like we said, he could have just claimed that he bought it directly. Iboilahu. Niraboy mai. What if the person who, so we paskin taka, we don't, even though we have these tinus, we could say maybe the mission is not a raya because it's not a good diak, or like we're saying now, we could be mechalik between a Yerush and lekeach, and maybe only a Yerush has to bring a raya that his father had it, but a lekeach doesn't. In the end, we don't paskin like that. We do paskin like Rav Chia, that he has to have proved that he was there for at least 1 day. In fact, the Gemara, what happens if Niraba, if it's not that he was there for, we don't have a raya that the seller was there, but he was just measuring the ground. Is that enough, according to Rav Chia, that it's considered that we treated the same thing as if he owned it for 1 day? Amar Abaya, he. If he was doing this, if he was acting on it like an owner, that's enough to support the claim of the person who bought it from him, and therefore we'll be toyin on his behalf, and his chazaka will be valid. Rav Amar Avad Inish, the Sayer Arad Veloizavin. A person will sometimes measure a piece of land, but he doesn't buy it. So the fact that he's measuring it is not treated as if he lived on it, and therefore it's not a sufficient taina for the muhsik to say that he bought it from him, and he's going to have to bring an additional raya. The person actually lived there for a day, otherwise his chazaka will be treated as a chazaka she'eni matayin. Okay, we'll stop over here, and we'll resume tomorrow.
Thanks.